This is a short tutorial on how to process a Seestar Mosaic in Siril version 1.4, which is the beta 3. You'll need to have installed Siril along with other prerequisites such as StarNet and a couple of the scripts. Okay, the first thing we want to do is establish where our data is and establish some file structures. I tend to store all of my Seestar captured files on the PC, and in this case we're doing NGC 7000 and I've been doing a mosaic. So I've got these sub-exposures stored in a single directory on my D drive. I keep them separate from the processing. I then need to set up a folder structure to actually process the data, and in this case I've got a folder called Seestar, and in there I'll create a new folder called NGC 7000. We open that folder and create a new folder called process. Then back in Siril, click on the home button and point it towards the process directory that you've just created and click open. First thing we do is convert our Seestar sub-exposures into Siril. So we click on the add files to convert, navigate to where we saved our Seestar sub-exposures. In this case it's the NGC 7000 Mosaic. Subs, and on here click on one of them and select Control-A to select all of them and select add. Give them the name light and click on convert. We can't see anything. If you change the screen view to auto stretch, we can see the data. The next thing we need to do is to plate solve the sequence. So we go into Tools, Astrometry, Image Plate Solver. We disable near search, and most importantly we say solve the whole sequence. I tend to untick the skip already solved to force it to solve all of them and click OK. Now this is going through and plate solving every sub-exposure. We've got roughly, I think it's 300 of them, I think. So it takes a little bit of time. This is a fairly quick part of the process. You can see the progress bar down the bottom here showing that it's plate solving. It's almost finished. It's just saving all the files to disk at the end of the process. When that's complete. Almost. Okay, that is now complete. Sequence processing partially succeeded, check the log. So we close the dialog box. If we then scroll back up through the console log, we can find a section here that says 605 images successfully plate solved out of 608. So there were 3 images that probably didn't have enough stars in to plate solve them. If that is a low number, then you need to examine why that's happened, but I'm happy that only 3 were excluded from the process. So that's plate solved, and what we now have to do is register them as a mosaic. And the important thing is to select the framing method of maximum and then click on estimate. That has estimated that the output image is going to be about 4,400 by 6,200 pixels. You'll notice use drizzle is automatically selected, and we just click on go register. Now what this is doing is again identifying where all the stars are and then aligning all of the mosaic images to those stars. Because we've plate solved each of the sub-exposures already, it can do that mosaic in mode. Again, it's a fairly fast process. I can currently hear the fan on my PC whirring away like mad as it's using 100% of the CPU. And you know, this is quite a large mosaic. I'm deliberately running this whole process in real time so you can see the sort of times it takes to run these processes. Okay, that has now registered all of our lights. It says 605 image processed, total 0 failed, 605 exported. So it managed to match all of my sub-exposures. What we can now do is go into the plot and we look at the sort of the average FWHM across all of our sub-exposures. We've got some high ones here, but I tend to not bother about manually removing. What I'll do is go to the stacking tab and select these options. We go with additive with scaling, Winsorized sigma clicking. I tend to weight on the weighted FWHM, and that prioritizes the best sub-exposures. I don't find I need to bald a feather, but what I like to do is select the best 95% of my sub-exposures. So it's now saying that it will stack 574 of the 605. So it's excluding around 30 sub-exposures, which are the worst ones. I'll then select output normalization and RGB equalization and start stacking. Now this process is going to take quite a while. I'm going to run it in real time so you can see how long it takes, but it will take, I think in this case, it's going to take around 3 minutes or so. Some of the scripts that we've had to install, I've got up here. I've got the Cosmic Clarity scripts installed and the Graxberg scripts installed. I think the Graxberg ones comes as standard. Cosmic Clarity you need to separately install. I've also got StarNet installed for later processing, and again there's write-ups which show you how to install StarNet that can be used within Siril. So it's currently doing rejection stacking in progress. It's already done the normalization. It's now going through every single sub-exposure, lining them all up, prioritizing the best images and stacking each image on top of each other. As I say, we'll leave this running in real time. If I drag this up, you'll see that it's currently using all of my CPUs. It's using a fair chunk of my GPU to do video encoding, but it's primarily using the GPU. So we're about a third of the way through. You'll see down this left-hand side, I've actually got a text file that I keep open, which prompts me to go through each of the steps. So I start with conversion to fix symbolic links there, then we plate solve, then we register, then we check the plots, and we're currently at this stage of stacking, and I keep a note here of the parameters I want to use. Once we've done that, we'll end up with a single image, which we then will follow through this process. We will plate solve it again. We'll rotate and crop it to get it looking how we want it to look. We'll extract the background using Graxberg. We'll color calibrate it. We'll then sharpen it with Cosmic Clarity, and then we'll reduce any background noise using Graxberg again. At that point, we save it and go on to use StarNet to remove the stars, because typically we want to process the stars differently to how we process the nebula or galaxy or whatever. At that point, we'll switch to a linear view. We're currently in an auto stretch view where the display is stretched, but the original image is still flat. At that point, we'll then go through GH stretch iterations, which is where the art comes in more than the science. We'll then optionally remove any green noise that's left. We'll change the color saturation to bring out some more colors. Then we'll go on and clean up the stars themselves. As I say, I like to process them separately. They have different stretching and colouring requirements. We'll then bring them all back together, plate solve it, and save the result. So that's me waffling along whilst we're now around probably 80% processed. The CPU is still running at 100%, and we're getting close to the end. I know this is the most boring bit, but I thought it was worth showing you it in real time. So many videos skip this whole process. I'm also doing a manual process rather than using any processing scripts. I find it a far more effective way. You can actually see what's going on and understand what the process is. Nearly there. Nearly there. So we're up to this process here. And there's our stacked image showing all the different sub-exposures in the mosaic, all stacked on top of each other. Okay, the next thing I like to do, having done that, is save this away separately. At the moment we're in our process folder. I like to move out of that process folder and move down into the Inglesy 7000 folder. So we'll open that folder up, and then we'll do a save as, which is this little area up here, save as, and we'll save it in there. And we're doing a 32-bit floating point. Just to be sure, I will then go in and actually open that folder, that file. And there's our stacked image. The next thing I want to do is rotate and crop it. Now, I'd quite like to tip it on its side, so I'm going to rotate it sideways. And then we need to crop it. Now, I want to keep a basic 16:9 format. So I select 16:9 and then we drag a box around the area that we think has got enough sub-exposures in to come up with a decent image. That's quite difficult to judge. I quite like to click on the little colour rainbow, because we can see over here we've got pretty bad data. Over here is not so bad, but again it probably needs to be shrunk down a little bit further so we can drag a box. And I typically drag it down to around 3840 again as the size that the Seestar itself would have produced. So I think we'll crop it at that sort of area there. So having done that, we right click and do crop, and we'll crop it there. We can then come out of the color map mode, and that's the image we're now going to process. So the first thing we want to do is a background extraction to remove any background gradient. So we go scripts, Python scripts, processing, Graxberg AI. Again, you see here the process it's running through, and it's opened up a dialog box for Graxberg. We're doing background extraction. We're using the current model. I tend to smooth around 0.8. As throughout this whole tutorial, there are stages here where you might try different values until you're sure that you've got a pleasing result. I like to keep the background because I like to look at the background, and we're using the GPU acceleration. We'll apply that. So that's completed. We'll close that and we'll save that, because I then want to just look at the background, which is called R light stacked BG for background, and that shows us what background it is removed. Okay, so that looks fine. So we'll then open up our stacked image again, which has had the background extracted. Next thing I want to do is color calibrate this. So we'll go into image processing, color calibration, spectrophotometric. Now in here, keep the defaults, but for the OSC sensor, you'll select the ZWO Seestar S50. On the OSC filter, because I use the light pollution filter for this image, we select the LP filter. If you didn't use the filter, you'd select no filter. So we'll select Seestar LP. I untick plot fits because it's of not much use to us, and then we do OK. Okay, and that has colour corrected the image. Basically, it's looked at all of the stars, compared them to the star colours in the Gaia catalogue, and determined what the colours should be in this image. So that's colour calibrated. So that's that step there. And the next thing I do is cosmic clarity sharpen. It's basically a deconvolution. It's a sharpening of the image. So we go into processing, cosmic clarity, sharpen. And there's our dialog box. I'm doing both. We're doing clear input directory in case there's anything been left in there. And I keep the default values. Now again, if you want to sharpen the stars more or less, you would change this. And if you want to sharpen the nebula or galaxy, you'd change this value here. And then we click on apply. Wait while the Python script runs. It says starting. And that shows us that it started because the SETI Astro banner has appeared. Okay, and that's completed the process. If you want to do a comparison between before and after, we can zoom in with the mouse wheel. And there's a little back arrow here. We can undo cosmic clarity. And then redo it to see exactly what cosmic clarity is doing. You see it's tightened up the stars. Click on this button down here to get back to our full view. Now the next step I want to do is do a noise reduction, because as you can see there's a lot of background noise in here. So I like to zoom in just to see what's happening. We do script, Python scripts, processing, Graxberg AI again. And again, this time we're doing a denoising. And on Seestar images particularly, I tend to go to a value of 1 because they are quite noisy. Use GPU acceleration and press apply. Now, if you watch the background here as it processes, you'll see it's processed 25% so far. %. Just about good. Now you can see how it's removes a lot of that noise. If I do an undo and a redo, you can see the difference. Again, we'll go back to our full screen view. And at this point, I tend to save that image, because what we're now going to do is remove the stars. So we go image processing, StarNet, star removal. Make sure that pre-stretch linear image is ticked and generate star mask is ticked, and click on execute. So we're up to this stage here, step 7, StarNet. Once StarNet is finished, it will open up the starless image for us. Now, this is currently in an auto stretch mode. And what we now want to do, because we're going to start doing our own stretching, we want to move back to a linear view. And you'll see it goes completely black. So we're going to do image processing, stretches, generalized hyperbolic stretch. Now, this is probably one of the more complex areas, and this is where you use your own judgment as to how you want your image to look. The first thing I tend to do is just do a basic stretch to move this chart so that we've got a decent area below the chart that we can move. I use the logarithmic scale view, as I find it a lot more intuitive to use. Okay, so we'll apply that first basic stretch, which has just basically given us a grey screen. The next thing I want to do then is do a linear stretch to remove all this empty space. So as I drag this, you'll see the graph move to the left. And if we move to left, you'll see that these clip value here is now 99%. I've removed 99% of the data. So I tend to then gradually back that off as the values come down. At that point, it's 7%. I go one more, it's now 0%. I'm not clipping any of the data, so I will apply that. We'll then go back to doing a generalized hyperbolic stretch again, and we'll stretch it until we just about get to stretching the full width, and we'll apply that. We'll then do another stretch, and this one you'll think, wow, he's gone way too far. And I have. What I then do is take the symmetry point and gradually bring that down until I get to what I think looks like the sort of image I want, which I think is around there. I can use the highlight protection. As you'll notice, there's quite a lot of data stuck at the end, this right-hand end. So I'll use a highlight protection just to bring that down a bit so I'm not oversaturating. Could try stretching a fraction more. Well, I think that looks pretty good. I might bring the symmetry point down slightly or up. As you can see, you can spend hours. On this tutorial, I'll keep it simple and we'll apply that. Now, I could just keep it at that. There's some fairly grey areas in the background. So I'm actually going to throw away some data by clipping the black point. And just going to there, all I've done is thrown away 2% of the data. And I personally think that's a better image than that slightly washed out image. If you go too far, you lose too much of the nebulosity. So again, it's moving this around until you get to where you want your image to look in terms of the amount of faint nebulosity you want to see. I'll stick at that and we'll apply that. And we can close that. The next thing I do is just check, see if there's any green noise that can be removed. So I go remove green noise and apply. Didn't really do much. And finally, I want to saturate the colour because the colours are okay, but for example, we could go to 100%. That's way too red for my liking. I think around probably maybe 40% looks about right, and we'll apply that. So that's our nebulosity, our actual deep sky object stretched. And at this point, I will save it as DSO. Then we want to open up our stars. So that's the star mask. And we go through a similar process. We go image processing, stretches, GHS. Sometimes the values are below 0, and I clip those values. And at this point, we want to go to a modified arcsine transform, and we stretch, and we stretch, and we stretch until we see all the stars that we want to see. And in this one, I've gone to a stretch of 10 and apply. And we'll close that. Again, we want to remove any green noise. So I do remove green noise and apply. You'll sometimes find that there's sort of some purple fringing around stars. And a simple way to get rid of that is to do a negative transform and then again do remove green noise and apply. And then reverse the negative transform. And that's our stars. What we could do is improving the colour on them. So again, we'll colour saturate them. And again, we might go to around 40%. Depends on how much colour you want in your stars. We could go to 1 and bring out more colour. I tend to stick around 40% and apply. So that's our stars. Again, we will now save those as stars. Now we need to bring those two images back together. So we go to star processing, star recomposition. Close the current image, yes. And the background we select as our DSO. And the stars, we pick our stars. Now at this point you can actually stretch the stars more if you want. I tend to leave it as it is. I think that looks quite a pleasing image, and we'll close that. Now that's our final image. At this point I like to plate solve it so that we have got a plate solve saved on this image. Click OK. You see it says it couldn't. You'll often find you need to downsample the image. And then again, click on OK, and then it's plate solved. You can check that it's been plate solved using the WCS information, which highlights what the objects are, and you can even overlay a globe on it and see. So that's our final image, which I will now, that's not been saved anywhere, I will save it as NGC 7000. Save that. And then I also like to save that as a PNG image so that it can be processed or uploaded to your favourite social media platform. And if we go into the folder, there's our final image, which is the North American nebula, or one part of it, as captured using a 2x mosaic on Seestar. Hope you found this useful. Obviously, to start the process, you need to have Siril installed, you need the scripts, and you need to have StarNet installed. Those instructions are all available on the Siril website. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. Goodbye.